Thank you, Patrick, and thank you all VISTA supervisors for joining us today. Just a few tips for participating so that you can get the most out of this session. The audio for this webinar is being broadcast by phone and online. If you'd like to stream the audio through your computer, please click the Communicate menu at the top left of the screen and select Audio Broadcast. If the audio cuts out during the session, go back to the Communicate menu and restart the audio broadcast. If you would like to participate in the verbal Q&A at the end of the webinar, you'll need to call a phone number listed at the bottom of the slide. To view live captioning, open the Media Viewer panel in the bottom right corner of the screen. To share an idea or resource, or to respond to one of the session activities, use the chat panel to the right of your slides, sending your message to all participants. If you don't see the chat panel, click the speech bubble icon in the upper right corner of the screen, as illustrated on the slide. You can ask a question at any time during the presentation by typing it into the Q&A panel, which is just below the chat panel. We may not be able to answer your questions right away, but we will be monitoring questions as they come in, and we'll queue them up to be answered near the end of the presentation. Our recording of today's webinar will be posted to the VISTA campus in about a week. You will receive an email once it's posted. I'd like to turn it over now to Patrick Triano. Patrick, take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Jessica. Before I move on, let's introduce everybody who you'll be hearing from today. My name is Patrick Triano, and I'm the Director of Training for the VISTA program. Joining me today is Jessica Birch, who some of you may know from the Supervisors webinar, Eric Powell, Training Coordinator for what cluster, Eric?
North, Central, and Southern.
Thank you. Andy King, who is the Training Specialist, Curriculum Developer, and Calvin Landrum. Calvin, you're with the Pacific Cluster?
That's correct. That's correct.
All right. I've asked them to join me here, one, because you'll get tired of hearing me talk, but also because these are the people often behind the scenes who are sending messages, supporting our VISTAs, ensuring that our participants get into the PSO, and I thought it was only right to have them join. So, the objectives for today are to give an overview of the changes to the PSO blend curriculum, as well as the changes in policy and procedure that underpin the curriculum. We'll give an overview of the roles of the VISTA member, the supervisor, the state office, and the training unit, just to be explicit around expectations. And we'll also point out the available blend-related resources. Just a word about the overarching reason for this presentation is I would say about 2 months ago, in December, we had a chance to meet with some of the intermediary supervisors. What became very clear is that it's important for the training unit, as well as the other units at headquarters here in VISTA, to reach out directly to our sponsors and our supervisors to ensure that any messages, any significant changes to the way that we're doing business be shared with you. We intend to keep this good practice up, and this is our first step in doing so in 2017. Let me also say, for those of you who are unfamiliar or who have no direct experience with the PSO blend, we will present an overview of the entire training vehicle in a matter of weeks. In the meantime, however, the resources referred to here offer a pretty comprehensive overview of the curriculum and one's responsibilities. All right. So, a very brief history of the blend. It was developed in coordination with a representative team of our state office colleagues starting back in the fall of 2015. So what was intended to be a pilot of approximately 30, perhaps as large as 60 people, became 2 events in February and March of 2016, training 616 people. So what's that? About 10 times larger than we ever intended it to be. So those members, the 616, in addition to one other cohort, about 161, along with their supervisors, their leaders, the CNCF staff, were surveyed over 4 months to determine, okay, what did we learn from this gigantic pilot? And, well, this is what we learned. Next slide. The experience and evaluations found that the candidate's success and overall satisfaction in the PSO blend was impacted by their English proficiency level, their participation mode, meaning basically, did they attempt to participate in a public space like McDonald's or Starbucks, or did they have some privacy? Their comfort level with technology. Interestingly enough, the type of community they were coming from while completing the PSO blend. Data reflected that those in rural communities had a higher satisfaction rate with the blend than those in urban city settings. Those with previous community development or social justice experience had a lesser satisfaction, and the supervisor's support. So just to point out, perhaps the obvious is that the first 3 reflect that this is an online environment, and so a participant must be prepared to work within that environment. While that last point, I think, is pertinent to almost every aspect of VISTA project implementation. Without you, the supervisor's support, we tend to run off the rails. All right. Some further evaluation findings. Feedback that required mitigation or action was that the syllabus took too long and was a distraction from service. That the interactions online and over the phone did not afford time to network or socialize professionally among the VISTA members, that is. Some of the assignments were not immediately useful, or in some cases they felt not useful at all. Systems were confusing, that is to say the IT systems were confusing, and people got lost in the process. Supervisors, in some cases, actively discouraged participation in the blend. And the administrative support was very heavy from the perspective of CNCF. By that I'm referring to the member support unit, the state offices, and the training unit. In some cases, again, the question is, if the syllabus was a distraction from service, what exactly was happening during that on-site orientation and training? Was the supervisor supportive of the training, or really not well informed enough about the training to schedule in such a way that that the blend wasn't a distraction, but actually an addition and a support? All right. Given that, we've made changes to the blend curriculum based on experience, feedback, and the recommendations. First of all, we have reduced the length of the PSO blend from the original 5 weeks to 3 weeks. We've also reduced the size of the breakouts. And by that, I mean both the virtual classroom and then the meetups that are connected to those virtual classrooms. So instead of there being 30 people, we're piloting 15 people for one facilitator. And along with that, we believe that will afford the time necessary to do the kind of networking the VISTAs need and hope for. And along with that, though, we're going to provide more opportunities for participants to connect with one another. So it's actually baked into the curriculum that they are interacting mindfully and purposefully with each other. There are certain field work assignments, or crudely put, homework, that we've also redesigned. So one was a piece around the on-site orientation and training. We, because we love abbreviations, refer to it as OSAT. That's the orientation and training that you, the supervisors, are implementing at the beginning of the VISTA's service year. We've also worked on the VISTA assignment description piece, as well as the poverty assignments. The details of the field work assignments and the deadlines can be found on the VISTA campus, and I'll be sure before this is over to show you exactly where they are. And finally, we are ensuring that the facilitators provide thoughtful, meaningful feedback. It was a perception of our VISTAs that our facilitators were sort of checking off the box as opposed to actually giving them in-depth insight into their work. So we're making sure that they're doing that. All right. We've also made changes to the PSO Blend process. So we've reduced the pre-service coursework, and by that I mean the online self-directed tutorials that are required before they even show up to your site. And specifically, we've taken out the comprehension check and put it in later into the Blend curriculum to essentially simplify the navigation between myAmericorps.gov, that portal, and the VISTA campus. Just so you all know, and I believe you do if you've ever worked with eGrants, that the IT systems of CNCS are just the opposite of seamless. What would that be? Seamful? It's not unlike Frankenstein's body parts. So we've attempted to make as little crossover between systems as possible. We will communicate with intermediary supervisors and their sub-site supervisors. We refer to them as sub-sites. You may simply refer to them as sites. That is, the sites that have been developed by intermediaries. We want to communicate directly with you and coordinate that communication with the state office and the member about the curriculum, and I mean the dates, the content of the curriculum, the forms and reports, and the policy. We don't want to break the chain of communication, while at the same time we want to avoid breakdowns in communication as it trickles down from us to you. Thus, we're asking for your email addresses when someone is registered in Blend so that we can share all of the information directly with you. We're going to continue to explore systems improvements for better usability. As I say, our systems are unforgiving here in CNCF, but we're working on it. We've also simplified perfecting the oath. Perfecting is a legal term of art, which I'll explain in a second. But we simplified it by creating a new oath form where the members will note the CNCF administrator of the oath. So it'll be one of the 4 people, including myself, that you hear from today, Eric, Andy, Jessica, or Calvin. And then you will witness, they will sign, and send it directly to the VMSU. So we've cut out actually 2 steps in that process, and hopefully that makes things easier for all of us, you and our colleagues in the field. And finally, we're going to add a self-assessment regarding the basic system and curriculum requirements to ensure the participant is positioned to succeed. Okay, so let's explore what we mean by position to succeed in the next slide. As we said, satisfaction and success of the PSO blend participant depends on his or her English language proficiency, having broad and reliable internet connectivity at site, the competence as well as the motivation to learn through computer-based training, individual access to a computer and phone on site. And individual is kind of a key there that I'll explain in a second. And that the learning environment, that at site there is space where the person can learn, and by that I mean a modicum of privacy, if not good privacy, to tune into the webinars and join the virtual classroom, along with the supervisor's support. Why are we doing this? Because we've discovered in the last year that some of our VISTAs are being enrolled in the PSO blend without any of us actually knowing whether the person meets this criteria. So what then happens is a great deal of back and forth communication, trying to get the person to participate, only to discover that they only have an iPhone by which to follow this training, or that the only internet connectivity that they have is at a McDonald's or at a library that's very hard to participate in. So we feel that if we can assess them beforehand and assure them that we will give them the support and accommodation that they need, then we'll be able to go back to you and go back to the state office to say that such and such a person is going to be challenged in participating in the blend. How shall we best approach this? It's not to rule people out. It's certainly not to prevent them from serving. In fact, we dearly want them to serve. But it is our attempt to support them as best we can with as much information as we can glean from them. Okay. Some of the policy developments. The terms and conditions, which is an online tutorial, must be accepted before they arrive on site. It's a legal requirement. It amounts to a service contract with the VISTA program. We will accommodate as much as legally possible. However, we will push them to accept the terms and conditions before they leave their home of record, before they show up to you on site. But if you hear from us, please stress to the member that they need to accept, well, they won't be a member, a candidate, that they must accept the terms and conditions. Otherwise, we can't activate them as a member. The oath must be perfected, as I explained before. Therefore, a candidate must attend the first webinar. Why? Because a CNCS official must induct them, must administer that oath. So a candidate can't simply skip the webinar and send in the oath form. And you, the supervisor, must sign as the witness. And then all of the work associated with the PSO blend must be completed. All right? So recordings and makeup opportunities are available, but failure to complete the work by deadlines will result in deselection or proposal for termination. All right? So we have not strictly enforced this policy up until this year. And so the purpose of this conversation is to alert you that we will now. We will fully inform you ahead of time. There is no intention to blindside you. We're not trying to punish the member, but rather to motivate the person to fully participate. All right? A proposal for termination, by the way, still permits a person to comply within 10 days, but it short-circuits the current administrative burden for the member support unit, for the training unit, and the state office, and in many cases, you dealing with all of the emails coming from the state office. All right. Other policy requirements. The training unit is going to monitor a member's participation in coordination with the facilitators. Communications with the members will be as timely as our reports are generated. It takes WebEx, I think, 24 hours to let us know who participated, who was present. And that reminds me of why I had pointed out individual access to a computer. All right, and I understand why, if you were to say, okay, my 5 VISTAs serving at this site of ours, let's all go into the conference room and we'll follow this webinar together. I fully understand why you want to do that. The problem is, one, only one person then will be registered for the webinar. So when we run the report, the other 4 people are going to show up as absent. 2 is that the webinar has functions that are designed for individuals to respond individually. If you only have one computer for 5 people, or how many people, only one person is actually responding, or they're spending a good amount of time developing consensus. So our recommendation to you is, if indeed you want to meet in a single room and share the experience, please do it with laptops. If everyone has an individual laptop, perfect. In fact, I think it's an ideal situation. So at any rate, once we get that report, we'll share it with you as well as the state offices. And if you're an intermediary, we'll share it with the intermediary supervisor as well. So the enforcement of the policy, as I said, is to ensure that a member fully participates. It's not intended to punish or to remove the person from service. All right. I think now we're ready to take a look, actually, at the PSO curriculum.
Cool. So as you said, we've updated the blend, the entire curriculum to go from a 4-week, well, I guess we started at 5, we went down to 4, and now we are at 3 weeks. We really want to see how much we can compress this down while maintaining the content and quality, while being less of a burden on the member and on you, and kind of get out of the way and let you do your work. So this is sort of what PSO Blend looks like. Before starting service, members will have to do their pre-service coursework, and that includes the onboarding forms and their myamericorps.gov account. That's things like doing their direct deposit, electing life insurance, signing up for other benefits, just kind of giving us their info on myamericorps.gov. And there is some online coursework on vistacampus.gov. All of this is available on the Starting Vista page on the Vista campus. You're able to go in there and see what that entails. There's things like the Mission and Legacy video, doing the terms and conditions, which again has to be completed before they can start service, the sort of benefits overview, and other things. So remember, arrives on site on their first day of service, which would be that Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern is their first webinar of their PSO Blend, and it's launching your Vista service. This webinar is meant to welcome Vistas to the program, give them an overview of what to expect in the blend and sort of what's coming up, and also it's where we administer the oath. The oath of service is done at the end. Again, we've simplified that process, so now the member signs it, you witness it, and it goes directly to the VMSU so that they can be activated for service and actually become a Vista and start receiving their living allowance and other Vista benefits. On Wednesday of their first week, they attend another webinar, and that's Navigating Your Vista Service. And again, that's at 3 o'clock. Very easy. It's Monday, Wednesday at 3 o'clock. For the Navigating Your Vista Service webinar, that's where we cover benefits like child care, what we talk about the Education Award, we talk about health insurance. We give them a really good comprehensive overview of benefits, and it's their chance to ask us questions that they have about that stuff. And we give them the resources to find the answers also on their own. Excuse me. Also that week, they should be logging into their virtual classroom, which is where, and they have 4 assignments that they will either begin or are due that week. The first one of those is How Poverty is Measured, and that's a video that alludes to the history of the war on poverty as it relates to historic measures of poverty that often don't capture the sort of reality of the people in the communities where Vistas serve. Then we go into Making Sense of Your VAD, which is a worksheet that provides guiding questions that help the Vistas deepen their understanding of their VAD and make sure that they see the connections between their focus areas, project goals, activities, and the outcomes that you have intended for their communities. And it also really guides them to consider what skills they need, how their efforts will contribute to community empowerment, and how to sustain the work that they're doing after their year of service is over. The third assignment they have is the minute intro, where they'll either create a video or a script introducing themselves, expressing who they are, what organization they serve, and what the goals of their project are. If you just go on YouTube and search for Vista Introduction, you can see a lot of really great examples of people who have already done this. There's lots of Vista blenders who have gone in and have made theirs public, so you can kind of get a hint at what your Vista may be doing. All right, next page, or next slide. Then we go into week 2. At week 2, on Wednesday at 3 p.m., during the second week of service on Wednesday at 3, you'll notice that all of the webinars are at the same time to make it really easy. It's Monday and Wednesday first week, Wednesday second week, Wednesday third week. On week 2, they have their first virtual meetup, and that's where they come together with everyone that's in their group in the virtual classroom, those 15 or 30 people that Patrick mentioned earlier. During that meetup, they come together and speak with their facilitator, go over the assignments that were due the previous Sunday, kind of dig deeper into those and get some clarification around the upcoming assignments. The upcoming assignments that they will have due on Sunday of that week will be the community profile, which is an assignment that explores the specifics of poverty of the business community by, researching demographics, the cost of living, and other things like that. And it also really helps them, really correlate factors in their community that contribute to poverty. And sort of help them understand what they're getting themselves into. The other assignment that they will have due at the end of week 2 are the 13 lessons about poverty. And this is a video and a worksheet that's due on Sunday. We sort of divided that video into 3 sections, and they send short responses or like analyses to each section. And they kind of tie directly to their work in the communities that they're serving. So you can see this all kind of relates back to you and their project and the work that they're going to be doing throughout their year. And finally, we get to week 3, where they have their final virtual meetup. And again, that's going to be Wednesday at 3 o'clock. Again, super easy to remember. And that's when they'll download their last assignment that will be due at the end of that week. And that's looking forward. And what this is a reflection assignment that really asks us to take some time to reflect and think about the challenges of their year ahead. Think about what support they may need. Think about who they should keep in touch with, and really help set some goals for the year coming forward. Upon completion of all assignments, and that means that that's attending all 4 webinars. Those are the first 2 webinars in the first week, and both virtual meetups, and completing all assignments. The VISTA members receive their certificate of completion, and they are done with their PSO blend, and they don't really hear from us again about it unless there's some follow-up that needs to happen. So kind of coming down from that into the roles of the VISTA member, and this is sort of the roles that they need to play throughout these first 3 weeks. First, and maybe most important, is completing all their pre-service work and doing all those onboarding forms. We can't really onboard them and start paying them and actually put them into service until all this is completed. Again, the terms and conditions are a legal requirement for starting service, so that must be completed before they can actually become a VISTA. They need to relocate if they are going to be relocating. We sometimes think that this is sort of common sense, but it doesn't always happen. The VISTA should be on site that very first day of the PSO blend. So that Monday when they have a webinar, they should be in the office hanging out with you guys, doing that webinar from the office. They need to attend those live sessions and submit their perfected oath within 24 hours of taking it on Monday. So that's, taking the oath, signing it, having a witness, sending it to the VMSU. They need to complete their assignments on time and submit their fingerprints within the given deadline. The deadlines are given during launching, through the launching webinar, which is on that first day. I think we reiterate and give them again on Wednesday. So those deadlines are posted and are very well known. If they ever have questions, they can reach out to anyone and we can get that for them.
Hey, Calvin, I just remembered, and it's not on this slide, but in this particular PSO that we started January 30th, one of the challenges that we've had is immediately after the first webinar, we ask them, please be sure to log into your virtual classroom. And we had a pretty high number of people not doing that. So I probably should add that to this calendar just to remind them they can't complete the assignments on time if they don't log into the virtual classroom on time.
Right, that's where those assignments are stored, that's where the instructions are, that's where they meet their facilitator and meet the other people in their group who are going to help them and support them throughout the process. And just one final note on the oath form. There is a new oath form that's been developed, so please throw away any old versions if you have any on your computer left. It's posted in the chat. You'll see a link to the new oath form. Please start using this form going forward. You'll see that it says bottom updated February 2017. That's the only form that we can and will accept. If we receive anything else, we'll have to send it back, and there could be a delay in processing your member and getting them fully started in the service. So now I'm going to pass it over to Jessica, who's going to talk about the roles of the supervisors.
Great, thank you, Calvin. So, VISTA supervisors, what is your role in this PSO blend? So, all VISTAs should be provided with a workstation. As Patrick mentioned earlier, that means individual access to a computer and phone. This is essential for getting their attendance and ensuring that they can, participate fully in each aspect of the PSO blend. Also, for blends, they need an environment conducive to participating in the PSO blend. So McDonald's is not great. They need to be at site, hopefully in a quiet place. If they have an open cube space, maybe you can lend them your office for an hour to participate, but something where they can really, get into the work and not be distracted. Also, specific for PSO blend, and Calvin touched on it with the oath, supervisors provide the oath form to the VISTA member, as well as the fingerprint cards on their first day of service. With all PSOs, the supervisor supplies the fingerprint cards, but PSO blend's a little different that you also need to supply the oath form to your VISTAs. So, like I said, like Calvin said, the link to that oath form is in the chat. Supervisors also need to witness the oath and ensure their member submits the oath form as a PDF to the VISTA member support unit that first day. So there's two parts here, so I'm going to touch on that one here. You need to witness them taking the oath, and you need to sign it. And you need to make sure they submit it as a PDF. I know that sounds pretty common sense, but sometimes we get pictures of oaths, it's half scanned, really needs to be full PDF. The best way to ensure that is if you have your VISTA member send it to the VMSU and copy you in that email, then you know. The second piece of this is the fingerprint card. So you want to make sure the fingerprint cards are submitted to VISTA HQ by the deadline, which is 30 days from their PSO start date. It's given in all the information that we give the VISTA members. We remind them multiple times so they should know when their deadline is for fingerprinting. So please just assist them in ensuring that those things get done on time.
Jessica, in the case of the fingerprints, again, if they don't submit them within 30 days, we will have alerted both the state office and the supervisor, and we'll send a proposal for termination to focus them on the need to.
That's correct.
To submit them.
That is correct. The criminal history check is for everyone's safety, so please help us, help your members get that done. So the next piece with role of the supervisor is you need to align the member's schedule with the PSO blend syllabus. So unlike the in-person PSO, PSO blend and OSOT they're simultaneously happening. So shaping your OSOT so that it can accommodate the PSO blend schedule is really key to ensuring that your members get the most out of both and that there's not those conflicts that can kind of cause some anxiety. Please also make sure that your members participate in the sessions and complete all assignments on time. As Patrick and Calvin mentioned, we will send out information to supervisors for each PSO outlining the deadlines for assignments, the schedule. We recommend adding that to your calendar, setting a reminder for yourself so that you can also remind your VISTAs of when those assignments are due and when those sessions are. Also, implement on-site orientation and training. It's key. We already said this, align it with the PSO blend. And last but definitely not least, please review the VISTA assignment description with the member. We use this quite extensively in PSO blend, and it's really their key to their whole VISTA service year. So please review that with them. We're going to ask a lot of our assignments is your participation is needed. So please make sure you're available to meet with your member.
Hey, Jessica?
Yes, sir.
I know that we've shared this this statistic more than once, but it's always worth repeating. So we can't say 100% of the members who have not received an on-site orientation and training have left service early. We can say just short of 100% of the people who did leave early stated that they never received an on-site orientation and training.
Right.
I think it pretty much underlines the importance of starting off a little slow and making sure that the person is well-oriented.
Exactly. Yep, start them out good and strong, and they'll go for the whole year. So now I'm going to turn it right over to Andy King.
All right. Thank you, Jessica. Now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the communications, some resources that are available for VISTA supervisors. So you know the VISTA campus. I'm sure you're very familiar with it. We've created a page, and you can see the link there that includes a number of resources for you about our PSO blend. Key among this is a document called Supervisor Responsibilities in the PSO blend, and this outlines step-by-step, day-by-day, all of the things that you as a supervisor need to do to make sure that you and your site are prepared for your VISTA before the VISTA shows up on site, that you know what's included in the blend, what the schedule looks like, the timing, the deadlines, and all of that. The next one is what we call the Guide to Entering VISTA Service. So this is a document specific to each specific cohort of the PSO blend. So every time we have a new PSO blend, we have a new guide to entering VISTA service, and the guide includes the schedule with all the dates, deadlines, when assignments are due, when webinars are happening. It includes links to register for those webinars. So if your VISTAs are not sure, like, hey, I know there's a webinar, but I'm not sure where to find it, refer them back to this guide. And we have the ones there for the current PSO blends and the ones that have already happened. So, so they're all there for reference. In addition to that, we have an overview of the PSO blend, describes the curriculum, the various activities, what we're hoping to get out of it. It also covers the policies. So what happens if somebody misses a webinar? What if someone, a participant doesn't turn their assignments in, their field work on time? All of that's outlined there in the overview document. We also give you access to the PSO Blend Classroom. So we heard from supervisors over this past year that they wanted to see what was included. We first made Word document versions of the assignments available. Now we've gone one step better. You can actually just enter into the PSO Classroom. You can see where the assignments are, download them, read the instructions, see the worksheets. So anything that's not clear, you can reach out to the training coordinator and get clarification around that. But also by being able to see it, you'll be better able to support your VISTAs in completing it. And then when this session kicked off, Patrick referenced this evaluation assessment that was done, and we got the results of it at the end of last year. The final report from that evaluation is available there as well. Some other resources, not so much documents, but people to support you. Primary in that is your program officer for CNCS at the state office that manages your VISTA project. Of course, us here, we here in the VISTA training unit are a resource for you as well. For each PSO blend event or each cohort, we have a particular training coordinator assigned to that, and the training coordinator is identified in the guide. So if you need to reach out to someone and you want to go to a particular person, reach out to that training coordinator here at the training unit. And of course, for questions around VISTA member benefits, the VISTA member support unit is a tremendous resource. So those are resources for supervisors. Now some communications that you will receive as a supervisor if you have a VISTA member who would or should be attending a PSO blend. First of all, you would receive from your program officer at your CNCF state office information about when that PSO is coming up and the enrollment deadline so that you know when you have to have your people selected and approved and pushed through eGrants and MyAmeriCorps so that they can then be placed and enrolled in the training. From the VISTA training unit, you would get communication that includes that guide to entering VISTA service, has all the details about the PSO blend, and on top of that, information about supervisor role in that PSO blend, just to remind you about what you should be expecting for that upcoming event. And then thirdly, each online classroom has a facilitator assigned to it, and only if there's an issue with, say, a missed session or a deadline that was missed by one of your VISTA members, in that case, you would hear directly from the classroom facilitator saying, well, it would take this form. The facilitator would write to the VISTA member saying, hey, we had a meetup, and I see you didn't make it. Here's what the makeup work looks like, and you need to complete this by, and if there's an issue, please let me know. You would be copied on that message so that you'll see the communication that's going to your VISTA member, and you can work with them to help make sure that they can get back on track, complete the makeup assignment, and then be ready to complete the rest of the blend. So that's it around communications for supervisors. A quick note about the role of the state office. All of you work very closely with your state offices, so you may be familiar with some of this, but some of it also is behind the scenes, and so we want to give you some sense of that so you'll understand when they're asking you for information or setting deadlines. So in the onboarding process of getting your VISTA candidates or your applicants to become VISTA candidates and get them ready to start as VISTA members, your state office, the program officer there, is making sure that the Social Security check and the citizenship check is going through and completed successfully. They're also conducting a review of the National Sex Offender public website, what we call the NSOPW, to make sure that there is no background offense that would prevent a VISTA from, or an individual from serving as a VISTA. They also would send to you fingerprint kits in advance of the start date for your VISTA members, and then they also enroll your candidates in the actual PSO blend. So I saw a question came in earlier from Dominique, and she said, with both of our new VISTAs, the ones that came on recently, she said, we didn't get the fingerprint cards prior to their start date. Is there a way to correct this in the future? Well, the answer is if you have VISTAs coming on board and you do not have fingerprint kits, please contact your program officer, let them know that you need the fingerprint kits so that they will have enough time to send them to you in advance. Don't wait until all your VISTAs are on site, because then there's going to be a lag time and your VISTAs will have less time to get their fingerprints done. All right, so that's some of the onboarding stuff that the state offices do. The next thing they do is they send to us here in the training unit your contact information. It's the only way that we can know who the supervisor is for each VISTA candidate who's enrolled in a PSO blend. So we count on them for that. That means they need to have accurate information on who is the VISTA supervisor for each position at each site. So if you're a large project, if you're a multi-site project, you're going to want to clarify with your program officer to make sure that they have the right information. I see Andrea put something in the chat here about supervisors. Do we meet grantees or sub-grantees? So the information that we get from the state office typically includes the site supervisors. So what we sometimes call the sub-site, or you might call the sub-grantee. So the individual supervisor who's working directly on a day-to-day basis with the VISTA, that's a must-have. We always get that. If it's an intermediary project and there's an overall project director or an overall supervisor, and we're provided with that information by your state office, we'll copy that individual as well. So if you have a project structure that has multiple layers and you want to make sure those people are copied, please give that information to your state office when they, when you have VISTAs enrolled in a blend, so they can send it on to us. A couple other things that your state office will do, they'll coordinate with us here in the training unit and with you as the supervisor to make sure that your VISTA members are successfully completing the blend. So what does that look like? If somebody's missing a deadline, if somebody has missed a session, a meetup or a webinar, they're copied on all of that communication. They can intervene if it's a case of illness, if it's a case of some other emergency that's preventing a member from participating, they can help intervene and provide support as well. And then lastly, they can provide answers to questions that come in from VISTA members or from you as the supervisor about anything related to the PSO blend or the start of service. So those are a lot of the roles that your state office will provide. So Andrea followed up in the chat and said, if the sub-site supervisor changes during the year, do we need to notify our program officer? Absolutely, yes. Not only for this reason, but for many other reasons of reporting, completing timesheets, sponsor verification, all of that. So by all means, yes, Andrea, thank you for that question. All right, now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Eric Powell, to talk about some of the other staff and their roles.
Thank you, Andy. So as you've probably heard, the VISTA training unit has a very intimate role with this PSO blend. We've already talked about the guide to entering service, but the training unit does ensure that all candidates enrolled by the deadline get an email to access this important document at least 2 weeks before they start service. So of course we want them to read it and follow through with everything that's in it. As Andy also mentioned, we also get the information directly from your state offices for your information and communicate directly with you about PSO blend requirements, make sure that you also have a copy of the guide to entering service and the deadlines so that you can follow up with your VISTA members to make sure they're in compliance with the regulations. The training unit also facilitates the candidates for a week of training. So on the first day, the webinar launching your VISTA service, we make sure they attend the webinar and we also induct the candidates and swear them into their first day of service. We also administer and oversee the 2 CNCS-led webinars, their first week of service, and explain how to navigate the systems that we use. We also provide ongoing assistance throughout their 3-week PSO blend. And as we said earlier, we coordinate with you, the VISTA supervisor, and the state office to make sure the candidate is successful and in compliance. As we continue to talk about the role of the VISTA member support unit, they will verify that they completed the paperwork, also the onboarding forms in my.americorps.gov prior to starting service. That also includes, as Calvin mentioned earlier, to make sure they completed their required terms and conditions of service. The VMSU will activate candidates within 5 days of receiving their oath form, provided they've completed all the onboarding forms. And they will also process the relocation for those who are eligible by posting vouchers on their my.americorps.gov website with instructions on how to return that document. So now I'll turn it back over to Patrick to finish out the presentation.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, all 4 of you, very, very much. Jessica, I think this is where I say please take a few moments to share your feedback through a quick poll.
You do.
All right. It's on the right side of the screen, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate your taking the time and participating in that evaluation. Just in case you're interested, I calculate that we do, 24 webinars for members, 12 for supervisors, and another 12 for leaders. Is that right?
Yeah.
So my crackerjack math comes up with 48 webinars that we do evaluate. We track the data, and for the most part, we have anywhere between 250 to as many as, I think you had the most, Jessica. You had the most, what, at something like 700 people attend. Yeah, about 700 people. Our mean is about 4 out of 5 in terms of satisfaction and attainment of goals. So these webinars play a really important role in the training cycle, in addition to either the PSO Classic, which some of you may be familiar with, and the PSO Blend. All right. So with that, thank you for taking the poll, and I believe then that, Marcella, we could open this up to question and answer over the phone.
Thank you very much. If you would like to ask a question, please press star followed by the number 1. You'll be prompted to record your first and last name. Please check that your phone is unmuted before you record your name. If you join the queue and then decide to withdraw your question, please press star followed by the number 2. Once again, press star 1 and record your name when prompted. Thank you.
Great. And while we're waiting for questions over the phone, just a reminder, when the poll opened, the other panels on the right side of your screen closed. So if you want to ask a question online, click the little triangle next to Q&A, and that will reopen the Q&A panel, so you can submit your question there as well.
It looks like we have 2 questions already. One of them being, will there continue to be a PSO Classic?
Yes. Yes, there will be. You know, we referred to that self-assessment earlier on in this presentation. One means of accommodating those who simply are not prepared to participate or aren't positioned to succeed in the blend is to give them the option to participate in the Classic. That is our intention, at least as far as I can see from here. Yeah, thank you for that, Calvin.
Yeah. We have one more question from Maggie Harris. It says, how much time should sub-site supervisors allot for their members to complete the PSO Blend homework assignments on average?
That's really a great question, and I should have pulled up the data that we calculated. Didn't we calculate something like 13 hours for the entire experience?
Yeah.
For 3 weeks.
So each of the 4 webinars is an hour and a half.
Right.
Roughly.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's, you know, what, that's 6 hours
6 hours.
there.
So
working
about
with you and working
6 or 7 hours for the field work for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it can be completed in less, could take more, but yeah, I'd say on average, about that much time.
Yeah. So, you know, the principle behind it, and through every iteration we get closer to our principles, is not to get in the way, not to be repetitive, but actually to give information that supplements their work on site and in the community, which is why we pared it down to really its essentials, the VAD, the poverty, causes of poverty, really the theory of change behind the causes of poverty, and the community profile.
We do have another question here, Patrick. Are you ready for this one?
Maybe.
All right. Will this new blend format start in March 2017? Will they be held at regular intervals or only as the need arises, i.e. supply and demand?
Very interesting. Let's see. There are so many ways to approach the answer of that. One is that many, particularly the curricular changes, are already implemented. The one piece that's not implemented yet is the self-assessment, and that should be implemented by March. The other interesting way to approach this is that we create a calendar of training events early on, and well, I say early on. Another way to say that is very late in the calendar year, November of the calendar year. So some state offices share that entire training calendar, while other offices simply say, this is your deadline, this is your opportunity for training. But we do plan on multiple opportunities for both the blend and the classics throughout the year, summer being the heaviest time. What we have tried to do, and this is probably too much information, but you asked for it. The trick of this is that the deadlines for the classics and the blend can contradict one another. Last year, if you worked with us, you may have noticed that we had to cancel certain training opportunities, training events. And it was because we were underfilling in one kind of event, in the classic event, and overfilling in the blend event. So what we've tried to do now is sequence the opportunities for in-person training events and virtual training events. And we have both of those sequenced throughout the calendar year. The sole exception is October.
So do we want to check and see if there's any questions over the phone? Marcella, are there any questions over the phone?
We've had no one queue up. Again, it is *1 and record your name after the prompt.
Patrick, it sounds like just what you said here has caused some more questions. Are you ready for some more that came into Q&A?
Maybe I am.
All right, so Olivia asks, it seems that PSO blend attendance is being discouraged/limited during 2017. Is that true?
No. What we're really trying to do is ensure those who should attend the blend. If they're going to succeed, and that's their best option. And equally, those who will succeed best in the classic will succeed in the classic. You know, the challenge, who asked this?
I think it's Olivia.
Olivia? The real challenge for us now, Olivia, is that we haven't even crossed our 12-month mark in working with this new mode of training. And so with so little experience under our belts, we just don't know what to plan for. We don't know what the right balance is. So the 5 of us here are constantly on our toes waiting to see what's going to happen. What's the registration going to look like? But we want to respond to needs in the most appropriate way that we can. What else we got going on? You guys read faster than I do, obviously.
There's another question from Upendra, who says, could we not change the nature of services provided by a VISTA member from indirect to direct to some extent?
That's a huge question. A little bit out of the purview of this webinar. Here's what I will say, though, and it's what we say to our members. First of all, it is by legislation that we're a capacity building program. So frankly, I like to avoid the terminology of direct and indirect. That's a very state and national grant term. To tell a person that you do indirect service is like, I don't know, telling them that they don't actually do anything. When in fact, what they are doing is very hard capacity building work. But we also say to the member that there is some percentage, very slight, of hands-on direct work with clients and beneficiaries in order to learn the job. For those of you who like hard numbers, I can't give it to you. And the Inspector General of CNCS would like me not to give that to you. But that's the essence, that's the nature of our job. We're capacity builders, and it's not up to us to change the legislation. But a modicum of direct service in order to learn the job. And by direct service, I'm not talking about photocopying and answering phones, but direct service to the beneficiaries or the clients is understood by the program to be acceptable with caution and moderation.
Cool. That's beautiful, Patrick.
How's that for you?
Beautiful. I'm going to go back to Marcella. Marcella, are there any callers on the phone who have a question?
There are none. Thank you for checking.
It would surprise me. The supervisors don't typically call over the phone. They're usually the Q&A. I like it.
The phone is sort of like using the post office now. I'm sorry to say that, Marcella.
It's okay, sir.
We do have another question. It is a little bit out of this Blend purview, but
okay,
let's answer it.
Let's answer it.
Aisha asks, besides sexual violent offenders, is AmeriCorps Vista felony friendly? What policies or documents can you refer to?
Actually, I love that question. I think it's a really important one, particularly in a climate where folks are somewhat fearful. All right, there are two, how shall I say, bright lines that cannot be crossed in terms of criminal history. One is any sexual crime that would put a person on the NSOPW. That's the National Sex Offender Public website. Any crime against a minor and murder. So actually, that's 3. Sorry, it's not my strong point counting. Those 3 they're non-negotiable. Outside of that, we will weigh every case by case, and permit both you, the supervisor, who is proposing this individual for service in VISTA, as well as the state office, to justify why this person is most appropriate for the position being offered. So I guess you could say somehow felon-friendly is not what I want to communicate. We are, however, humane and realistic and are looking for the right people for the right position. And we'll adjudicate every individual on a case-by-case basis.
Yep. We have a question from Sophie Miller to start, whose name I recognize. I think she was in one of my supervisor orientations. She says, will sites and programs that have dozens of visitors have a limited number of slots for members to participate in the blend versus the in-person PSO?
No, no, and really that call is between, you should negotiate with your state office. You know, we refer to the state offices as field liaison, the Office of Field Liaison. They are our liaison with you. So there are certain decisions around managing member input and managing projects that we do not interfere with. We have some input based on availability, volume, but it's not our intention to limit, and having 12 people in any kind of event, whether it's classic or blend, and I'm looking at all of the training coordinators, but I don't see that as a showstopper. We will accommodate as long as we have a sense of what's coming in the future and that we've been able to prepare for it. So I hope that answers.
Yep. Something else sort of in the line of blend, is the MSU able to help with technical difficulties submitting assignments, or do those questions need to go to their blend facilitator? Eric did post an answer, but those do need to go to the facilitator. The VMSU doesn't really have the technical knowledge or just even purview to deal with the blend classroom, so those questions will need to go to their facilitator. If there is any issues with submitting assignments, they can submit those directly to their facilitator. They're going to have to make their way back that way anyway, so just have them connect directly with their facilitator for any technical issues.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons we reduced the size of the classroom to 15, so that those facilitators are really positioned to provide that individual attention. I mean, the VMSU, they're helping 6,000 VISTAs on countless issues, so this is one they don't need to worry about.
Right. And rule of thumb, the member support unit are not trainers. They're there to make sure that all the benefits are in place. We used to crudely say anything to do with money, that's the member support unit, but that's a crude way of putting it. They deal with all issues outside of training. So it's either us as the training unit, but in this case, it's the facilitators, work directly with the classroom facilitator. What else is going on? Eric, you got something over there?
Well, there is one question. It's kind of off topic, but we'll handle that one separately.
Okay.
And so someone here asked, Lynette asked, are the same facilitators from PSO Classic facilitating PSO Blend?
In some cases, yes, but as you can imagine, we need many, many, many more facilitators to manage the blend at any one time than we, and we need the classic facilitators to train when there's a classic event, and they can't do both simultaneously. That was a garbled way of saying, in some cases, yes, when they're available, but there are many other facilitators who work on the blend who do not work in the classic.
I guess we should go to the phone one last time. There's no more questions in queue to see if anyone's there.
Great. Okay, Marcella, what do we got?
We still have an empty queue.
Okay. Okay. Well, if there are no other questions popping up, we may have exhausted the conversation. And ladies and gentlemen, that was our intention. I hope we didn't exhaust you, but we did answer your questions. And I hope you found this useful. I know that we, the training unit, really appreciate working with you directly. Speaking for myself, sometimes you are the mystery wizards behind the screen. So to be able to communicate and work with you directly is enlightening as well as a pleasure. So I hope that we'll maintain this level of communication and continue the good work. So please, everybody, stay in touch, and thanks so much for joining us. Scott, thank you. Marcella, thank you. And goodbye, all.